All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this 1 hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar. I'm Ariel Rivers, NACD's Pacific Region representative, and in sort of a unusual context for these webinars, I'm dialing in from San Juan, Puerto Rico today, where NACD just had our very successful summer meeting. So today, per normal with today's webinar, we're going to go through some presentations and then we will have an opportunity for questions and answers as well. And we are recording this webinar to post on our YouTube later. Per usual, please share widely with your colleagues so that we can make sure to get the good word out about these great programs. Please keep yourselves muted for the duration of today's webinar. And if you do have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to pop those in the chat box so I can read them out loud for the recording as well. Now I am going to pass it over to Ron Rohal to provide a few introductory comments. Ron is chair of NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, which is part of our Natural Resources Policy Committee. Ron?
Hey, thank you, Ariel. And I welcome all of you to the monthly Urban and Community Conservation webinars offered by the National Association of Conservation Districts through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. These sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners charged with guiding the association's services and support for districts' work in developed and developing areas. Our goal through these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other and various agencies and organizations. And we appreciate the support of the Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation for making them possible. I invite you to let us know what you think about each webinar and other topics you would like us to cover by contacting NACD staffer Ariel Rivers. And please tell our national NACD leadership what type of assistance you would like from your national association for your urban and community conservation work. And now I'll hand it back over to Ariel for the introduction of our speakers.
Great, thank you, Ron. So we had planned.
You're welcome.
We had planned today to have Delane Atcitty of the Indian Nations Conservation Alliance join us, but it sounds like he's actually having some technical difficulties. So I'm here. Oh, good, Delane, excellent, perfect. Well, before I hand it over to you, I'm just going to mention that we do have another guest speaker as well who was able to join us at the very last minute, and that's Chas Robles from Conservation Legacies, who's also going to be able to talk about his conservation or their Conservation Corps program. So thank you to both of our speakers. Delane, if you are comfortable and feel ready, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and discuss your program?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Delane Atcitty. I'm currently on the road right now visiting with tribes in Idaho. So I just pulled over here to chat a little bit with you regarding our youth corps that we started right before COVID started, a little over 2 years ago. And, the context of starting a tribal youth corps is our tribal nations, like everyone else throughout our countries, we're having an issue with, who's going to fill the boots of the next rancher, farmer, conservationist. So we decided, instead of kicking the can further down the road, we decided to start working on the issue right now. And hopefully, 10 years from now, our thoughts are that some of the youth that we're working with now will be the administrators, the managers, the district coordinators of tomorrow. That's why we wanted to start working with youth from 18 to 28 years old. And our thoughts were, as you all know, this line of work, you got to get dirty. You got to get out there, get in the field, to really understand, the natural resources that you're working with. So we decided to employ 6 tribal youth within a tribe within their reservation to work on a project that would benefit the tribe as a whole, and also would address conservation or agriculture, or both, you know. And so with
Delane, I think, oh, we lost him. Oh, no. I was worried about that. We were having a bit of some sound difficulties there. Let's give it a couple seconds and see if he's able to pop back on. In the interim, Chas, I'm going to pass it over to you if you don't mind, and maybe you can just start introducing yourself, and then we can switch into a panel discussion if we need to, if Delane's able to pop back on.
Absolutely. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Chas Robles. He, him, his. I'm the Corps Director for Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps. I'm based here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps is one of 9 core programs of Conservation Legacy, serving the entire nation, including Puerto Rico as well. So we've got some individual placements through our sister program, the Stewards program, that are based in Puerto Rico. And we focus on engaging youth and young adults in conservation and national service programs, as I mentioned, across the country. Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps, our focus is working with Indigenous youth and young adults. We were created in the Pueblo of Acoma in 2008 by a man named Cornell Toribio. He was a crew leader with the Southwest Conservation Corps, which is another of Conservation Legacy's programs. And Cornell saw the impact that conservation corps were having on young people coming from across the country to participate in national service programs, building trails, doing habitat restoration, working to protect our public lands and land, water, and air in southwestern Colorado. He saw a real need for this type of work in his community. You know, as Delane was talking about, you know, there is a real need within tribal communities to pass on the legacy as the original stewards of the land, water, and air here in this continent. We're seeing a big disconnect between a lot of the traditional teachings and values, especially as it applies to conservation being passed on, and just a lot fewer of our young people spending time outside working on the land and with the land and continuing that legacy as caretakers and protectors of the land. And so what Cornell did is worked with our former president and CEO, Harry Brule, to create a program based in the Pueblo of Acoma. For many years, conservation corps had recruited Indigenous young people from nearby and neighboring tribes and Indigenous communities to participate in their conservation corps programs, essentially bringing the Indigenous young folks to the Conservation Corps. And what he did was flip that script to bring the Conservation Corps to Indigenous participants and to tribal communities. You know, there were a lot of barriers that Indigenous young folks faced in participating in the programs, and primary among them was the distance that folks had to travel. A lot of tribal communities are rural, you know, 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours away from the bases of operations that Conservation Corps programs are based in. And so by bringing the program to the communities, it was easier for folks to participate, remove those barriers. And then it also, what it did is rooted these programs in community. You know, our staff are entirely consist of Indigenous folks. We have program offices in the Pueblos of Acoma, Pueblo of Zuni, the Navajo Nation, the Hopi Tribe. And then here in Albuquerque, we serve urban Indigenous young folks and partner with some of the surrounding Pueblos and tribes in the greater Albuquerque metropolitan area. And by basing in these communities, we create strong connections to the communities, and we are rooted in the communities, which has a number of benefits. I'm sure, if Delane hadn't been disconnected, he would have talked about a lot of those benefits of being based in tribal communities. What we found is that, having the base of operations be in the communities, having staff that are from the communities that we're serving, provide a ton of benefits. First of all, our participants see themselves reflected through our staff as well. And then they also have folks that are supporting them, our staff members that are supporting them, who have a shared lived experience and an understanding of where our young people are coming from. And then the other really strong opportunity that it provides us is connecting with the community and having the community being able to create programming alongside us. I'll give a couple examples of those programs. It looks like we may have Delane back on too. So after I give these examples, I'll pause and see what direction we want to go in, Ariel. But two really strong examples of the communities that we partner with and work with, helping us to create programming, are our hiking club, which serves elementary aged youth, and it takes them out to public lands and tribal lands to teach them healthy living habits, prepares them, gives them the supplies and the support to go out and recreate on the land and build those lifelong habits of connection to the land. It connects them to public lands, and then we also bring in elders and knowledge keepers to talk about the cultural significance of these places and spaces, talking about the names of these places in their languages, the stories that are associated with these places, to create that deeper connection for our young participants to these places that their ancestors have historically lived in and taken care of and managed. And we've just seen it be a really tremendous program to help build that lifelong connection to and love of outdoor places. And then the other example is our traditional farm corps. So that was created in the Pueblo of Acoma by our former program manager, Aaron Loudon. And he was connected to the community and heard from the community their concerns about losing agricultural traditions. The way that he talks about it is 10 years ago when he created the program, there were a handful of farmers, and all but one of two of them were farming clover. They were growing clover and feed for stock animals. They weren't growing subsistence crops. They weren't growing heirloom variety of crops, that were then put back into the community to provide healthy food. They were growing feed for livestock. And so he worked with the community to connect knowledge keepers and elders with young people to pass on the culture and the traditions and the heritage of farming. And since then, we've been able to develop a very successful program where we grow healthy heirloom variety, landrace variety food, give it all back to the community for free of charge. And then we've also developed a really robust seed bank with over 30 varieties of seeds that are now available to go back to the community so that the community can continue to grow those crops. And we're talking about areas that are rural. They're food deserts. The nearest source of fresh foods are over an hour away. And so our crews are now growing healthy fruits and vegetables to give back to the community, and they're continuing the legacy of farming. And then we do have a lot of what I call conventional conservation corps programs. So when we're out building trails, planting trees, removing invasive species, we have a very robust cultural preservation program as well. And then we actually do partner with a few conservation districts here in the greater Albuquerque area, the Middle Rio Grande Conservation District and Ciudad Soil and Water Conservation District. And with Ciudad, we're actually a part of a very large scale collaborative team to protect the Tijeras watershed. So it's a really great example of how tribes, municipal governments, federal governments, and nonprofits are coming together and collaborating to meet the mission of the conservation district, to meet the mission of our organization, and to really protect some pretty critical waterways, riparian areas, and land bases. So I'll pause there. A lot more to talk about our program, but I just want to see a direction that you want to go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chas. We do have Delane back on, so I know he got cut off mid-thought. So it'd be great if Delane, if you're able to pop back in and continue describing your programs.
All right, sorry about that. It's we're on plan B now.
Yeah.
But I got a strong signal and we're good to go. I was talking about our the content of what we started, the Youth Corps, to get a better idea of the need for a Youth Corps. A lot of our tribal nations have 60 to 70% unemployment. And we, one of the bigger reservations has average mean income among its tribal members of $9,400. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for our youth to make a little decent amount of money, and also work on a project that would give them pride and also give back to their tribal nation. And that's kind of been the theme lately, is to, to really think about, instead of asking our tribal nations for assistance, what are we doing ourselves to give back? It's kind of that old JFK, what he said, and ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. So we're trying to follow that a little and trying to figure out how we can use the youth to give back to the tribal nations. And so I think that's the direction we want to go in the future with this. So our Youth Corps, we ask that 80% of it is either conservation or agriculture oriented, and that it does good for the tribal community as a whole. So we don't do individual projects that would an individual would benefit off of it. We try to get the most out of it. And then 10% we want to work on professionalism, and being punctual, showing up on time, starting to do reports and whatnot. So we started that successfully with the Rocky Boy Cree. We even helped them get together a job packet for their next employment, and we gave them a letter of reference and a certificate saying they completed ours. And 2 out of 6 of them got permanent positions after working with us, and 1 of them went on to college. So that was pretty neat. And the last 10%, we asked that they work on cultural issues, and they got to help clear out their ceremonial grounds for sun dances and sweat lodges with the youth. And then at that time, we asked the tribal elders to talk a little bit about natural resource management, what they remember, what it used to be like. And that's really beneficial because, our tribal nations rely on oral history to pass down all that information. So that's what our Youth Corps consists of. We pay a Youth Corps member $18 an hour. And that's pretty unheard of on our tribal lands for, especially for youth projects. So our hopes is that they do get that money and they invest it in themselves to go on to bigger and better things. We pay the lead Youth Corps participant, the one that looks over the other 5 participants, $20 an hour. And, she's the one, or he does timesheets and whatnot. So we started off at Rocky Boy Cree. Last year, we had a project with Jemez Pueblo where they did electrical fencing, and they also did rangeland assessments. We had a PhD doctor, and he had his doctorates in wildlife ecology. So he was pretty familiar with doing assessments. So we got them the tools to do that for the tribe. So this year we're building on that, and we're starting a virtual fence project with the Nature Conservancy. And if you've been on that road from Albuquerque to Farmington, New Mexico, about halfway is a little town called Cuba, New Mexico. South of there, about 10 miles, is an area that has been overgrazed for quite a while. And that is leading to erosion and water quality issues. So that's the area that we want to address with this 5-year virtual fencing project. and then also have the Youth Corps assist wherever they can with that project. We're in talks with the Crow Nation to have a Youth Corps there, something to do with their bison program. And then we also have about 3 other tribes on the list that want to have projects. So our hopes in the future is that we can have maybe at least 5 to 8 tribal youth projects going throughout the summer. So I think, I got good feedback from a lot of the participants. I even got a call like 4 in the morning one time, and the participant was asking if there's going to be enough funding for this year. So I think, they're getting a lot out of it. And we're also reinvesting in their future and the tribe's future with, NACD partnership is making this possible. So.
All right, great, Delane. Thanks for describing those great programs. And I want to remind our audience, if you do have any questions for either Delane or Chas, feel free to pop those in the chat box, and I'll make sure to read those out loud. So I want to pop over again to you, Chas, and see if you have any additional comments or program opportunities you'd like to continue describing.
Yeah, I think just to build off of Delane's comments, the work that we do is very similar, and it's trying to take a holistic approach and very much focused on professional development and skill building. So we do technical trainings on chainsaw, partner with the United States Forest Service to offer official chainsaw certifications, herbicide applications, certifications. We've been partnering with a few colleges and universities, Coconino Community College, Northern Arizona University, Western Colorado University, to provide accreditation to our participants. So in addition to the professional development and industry recognized certifications that we offer, we're also connecting them to post-secondary education opportunities, getting them some credits that our program pays for, opening the doors to them pursuing higher level degrees in these fields, and that opens a lot more doors for career opportunities for them as well. So very much focused on providing them pathways to success, employment, education in the Western paradigm and in the Western world. But as Delane mentioned too, rooting our programs in the traditional world within the communities that we work in as well. And so we oftentimes talk about, as Indigenous people, that we're walking between 2 worlds. There's the traditional world and the Western world. And we recognize that in this day and age, we need to be prepared to be successful in both of those realms. And so by connecting with knowledge keepers, with elders, with tribal historic preservation officers and cultural historic preservation officers, we try to bring in those elements. Again, Indigenous people were the original caretakers, managers, stewards of these lands. All public lands these days were at one time Indigenous lands, ancestral lands. And so making that connection with folks and keeping those traditions and teachings alive and well, rooting our participants in culture, and reconnecting them to culture, reconnecting them to the land base, so that we're preparing our young folks for success in that traditional world as well. I think that's something that's really critical, and I appreciated hearing the focus and the importance that Delane and the folks with his program are really focusing on too. So a lot of our crews a lot of our programs are focused on the crew side of things. That's where we send crews of between 4 and 8 folks out, typically camping for up to 8 days at a time. We provide all the equipment and the tools, the food, the transportation. They set up a spike camp in the field, and they work with our agency partners to go and complete work. That's a lot of our projects are based on that. But we also operate individual placements where we pair Indigenous young people with our agency partners to provide additional capacity and support to our agencies, and also really provide that in-depth career development opportunity for our young folks. So oftentimes those individual placements are coming in with a little bit more expertise or experience in specific fields of study, or they're coming in with advanced degrees as well, and looking to make those connections with the employers and those agencies. And we've seen a large number of our crew and individual placement participants and alumni go on to get employment with agencies, directly with tribes, and become the next generation of mentors and supervisors for our young people that are coming through the programs and having these experiences. Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll talk about is over the years, our focus has not been to see our logo on these experiences, but working with other tribes, with other conservation corps, with other communities across the country to utilize some of our structure, some of our lessons that we've learned, some of the mistakes that we made over the years to help seed and catalyze new programs and see these types of programs positively impact as many Indigenous young people and as many Indigenous communities across the country as possible. And it's been really awesome to see, especially with Secretary Deborah Holland's announcement of the Indian Youth Service Corps, at the federal level, funding coming in to support this work, going directly to tribes. So for a lot of the years that we've been in existence, we've been partnering with the National Park Service, Forest Service, other federal agencies to complete this work. We have strong partnerships and we love those partnerships. And we're also really excited to see funding coming in to support them, but also coming directly to tribes and communities to support the priorities that we've identified of the work that needs to happen within our communities as well. And so we're really excited. I think we're really at the forefront of a lot of this work being done. So it's great to see programs like Delane's coming up. There's other core programs across the country that are working with Indigenous participants, Indigenous communities and tribes to get this work done on the ground. It's really exciting time to be doing this work and looking forward to the next few decades to see how this continues to develop and grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chas. Do you have additional comments, Delane?
Well, I was just going to say that, it's good to hear all this, coming into fruition, but it's also, with the youth corps that we have established, we also started working with their local universities. So I think the Rocky Boy Cree, we got them credits with Stone Child College, and then also with the other tribes where we have this, like the Crow, I think Little Bighorn's going to participate and give them college credits. So it's good to see them start to build, start to lay a foundation for themselves. We also talk about some of the issues that we run into, with 6 youth corps every year. Chances are there's not going to be room for them when they do get that degree and come back to the tribal nation. And we all ran into it in our professional career, is that nobody makes room for you. And so that's just a fact that we have to work with. And what I press upon our tribal youth corps is that they if nobody invites you to the table, bring your own table and start to build things on your own. There's over 55 million acres of tribal rangelands, and some of that is 14 million acres of tribal farmland. So there's a huge opportunity to be consultants and contractors in the future to work on these lands. And there's even more of an opportunity with the tribes co-managing the Bears Ears National Park. So there's constant opportunities that are starting to build up, and I think there's a huge future for them, working in natural resources. I'd like to, one of the questions that I saw was asking if any of us working with the Seminole Tribe. We have not personally reached out there yet, but we want to secure a constant funding source until we start to, because we don't want to get a lot of hopes up if we can't come through with it, And then the other one was some of our challenges, and I just mentioned one of our biggest challenges is there's most likely there's not going to be a slot saved for you when you do come back. It's just the way it's been, and sometimes it's hard to get your foot back in the door because in some instances, once you get educated, you become a threat somewhat, and so it's going to be a challenge,
And we're hoping that we're helping prepare these youth for those challenges. Thank you.
If I could too answer those two questions in the chat. We have not worked with the Seminole. We've had Seminole participants actually in our Albuquerque program. Albuquerque has a large urban indigenous population from folks from many nations across North America, and we have had some Seminole leaders and participants in our program here, but we have not partnered directly with the tribe. Our method of partnering has been one of invitation, as opposed to approaching tribes and trying to sell the program. Tribal communities have had a lot of external organizations and entities come in, knocking on their door and offering the next best thing, only for that work to fall flat, or promises to go, unfulfilled. And so what we do is we let our work speak for ourselves. And then I mentioned the 5 communities that we're working in: Acoma, Zuni, Hopi, Navajo Nation, and then urban indigenous community here in Albuquerque and some of the surrounding pueblos here. Those have all been, we've been invited into those communities. And so the tribes and community members have seen some of the successes that we've had and have reached out to us and worked with us to bring those opportunities to the community. And as Delane said, it's really critical. One thing that we've found is we have to really be intentional about building partnerships, to not making promises that we can't fulfill. And then we're also, the partnerships that we build, we want them to be lasting. We don't want to be a program that comes in and partners for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. We want to be there, for lifetimes. And that takes resources. It takes a level of commitment. And that's why, when I talk about being based in communities that we serve, that's the level of commitment that we're looking at. We're investing in staff positions, we're investing in facilities and rent and equipment and gear to be located in those communities. We don't want to operate remotely. We want to have resources locally to provide the support to the community, to our participants, that is needed to be able to operate these programs. And we, I think it's really critical to be honest about a lot of the challenges that we faced. Indigenous young folks face higher and disproportionate rates of suicidal ideation, higher and disproportionate rates of addiction, higher and disproportionate rates of not graduating high school, and unemployment. Delane talked about the average income in the communities that they're working in, and we see that as well. And and that's one of the things that those are constant. I was on a couple calls today, actually, trying to work through some of these issues with our participants and our staff. And that's the reality of working in Indigenous communities, is we do have disproportionate rates of a lot of these challenges, but it also leads to, when you're able to provide the wraparound services, the support and the structure to help young people stay on a good path, have the support and mentorship from folks who have been through similar lived experiences, the successes that we see are just so much more amplified because of the challenging circumstances and situations that our young people are coming through. So, we do have a lot of people that don't make it through the program because it's just they're facing too many challenges at home, but we continue to provide support to them, even services to them, even if they're no longer in the program, because, again, we're committed to folks' success in and outside of the program. But, I think it is very critical to recognize where our young people are coming at, and then also be committed to meeting them where they're at as well. And I think that's some of the challenges that we've seen other conservation corps that have a history of working with non-Indigenous participants is it's easy to rely on structures and systems and program models that have worked in these other communities and try to take that same approach when working with Indigenous youth and young adults in Indigenous communities. But you can't take a cookie cutter approach. You really have to be flexible and be willing to meet folks where they're at and provide those additional services that, maybe the young person from an affluent background that's coming from out east to participate in these programs, they're not coming with a lot of those same challenges, and they might not need as much of that wraparound support. But I think that's been something that it certainly is a real challenge, but it also just leads to so much more impactful successes when you do see young folks committed to sticking through the program and gaining the full benefit of these types of programs.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Chas. And Delane, you might have seen the question in the chat box. Stephanie is asking that you mentioned that youth returning to the tribal lands with education can be a threat. So would you mind expanding a little bit on that context?
Yeah, so quite a few of our tribal nations, they employ some of the employees, some of them, some of them get together, they get that position because of nepotism or because of politics, and they secure that position, and they sit it out in that position for years, even decades, and there's no change. And these youth, their education level and their capacity gets greater every year. And there's a high caliber that's starting to be available, but we're not switching out our employees at the tribal level fast enough. It's not competitive enough to really be effective with our resources. So that's why I made that comment, that's something that we see, and change doesn't happen fast enough for that reason. Things stay the same as they were, the day that some of these employees got hired, because they reached their capacity level. So that's my thinking behind it. But if we can, what I'd like to see is these youth get the training, get the boost of confidence, that they can attend any university that they choose to, in any field, whether it's working with oceans or working with wetlands or working with rangelands, and they come back and want to serve their community. But if not, be prepared to take on another challenge of being your own boss and running your consulting business, or making your own opportunities, because it's a great lifestyle, that if you have that much power, you can offer it back to your people. And right now, I'm here in Fort Hall, Idaho, at the tribal casino. I met with some relatives here, and literally a lot of the tribes are intermarried from coast to coast because of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, because of the boarding school system. The kids got together and they got to meet each other, and now there's tribal members, like there's Navajos probably in Seminole Nation and vice versa. And so it's exciting. It's neat to see this.
Great, thank you for that, Delane. And you touched on something as well that I kind of want to get back to with both of you, and it's this idea of bringing your own table, or making your own table, or making the table that we have bigger. And so I'm kind of curious from both of your perspectives. We talk a lot about within the conservation district space, how state conservation districts can responsibly engage with tribal conservation districts or tribes at large. And so I'm curious if both of you have any suggestions or comments about how to make that table big enough, but recognizing the different Indigenous and Western viewpoints, and how they might be collaborative rather than, disparate or what have you as well.
Right now, we're a little behind the ball, but I think we're making an effort, and we're starting to interact with our brother and sister conservation districts. And with this funding opportunity, we're starting to participate in these opportunities. But we don't want to have these talks when resources get to serious, crucial points where there's hardly any water running down the system. It's better for us to all sit at the table and make plans ahead of time and work with each other, so we don't have to, involve, get lawyers or judges or whatnot involved. We can start to work together now and build rapport and build trust between our organizations. And I think that's what it's going to take. So I'm glad that we're starting to go that direction right now. So I think, you know, it has to be reciprocated. Not only does the state conservations reach out to the tribal nations, but the tribal nations need to also reach out to the states. And I haven't seen that in the past, but I'm hoping that we can start to get over that barrier moving forward, just out of necessity. We have to do it. There's no more choice. Thank you.
I think that for a long time, there's been this false duality set up between Western science and traditional knowledge. They're not mutually exclusive. And oftentimes they build each other up and they complement each other if we're open to recognizing the overarching themes and the similarities. You know, and I think that now, especially, it's a really exciting time to see a lot more opportunities to marry Western science and traditional knowledge, and the value that is being placed on traditional knowledge. And so that's something that is really exciting. I do see a lot more requests, you know, from various agencies and entities to consult with tribes, which I think is a good thing. It also is a bit overwhelming because it's almost like everything is now, tribes are now being asked to consult on everything, and there are not enough staff people, there are not enough resources, there's not enough time to be able to do that. So what I always tell our partners is, you know, before consultation happens, relationships need to be established. Invest in building relationships, because, you know, while consultation is a legal matter and that's a legal process, what's going to help support that process being successful is having strong, rooted relationships, and that takes time, you know, and that's something that we all seem to be have more less and less of, right? There's more being asked of us. We have less time to actually do it, but invest in building relationships. Reach out to your neighboring tribes or tribes that you want to collaborate before you get to the consultation process. Bring them in, you know, and that's one thing that we constantly see as well. We're not a tribal entity. We partner with tribes in communities, but, you know, oftentimes tribes aren't brought in until the project's already been created, and then they're asked to comment. Bring tribes in to develop, you know, what the project is. Bring them in from the very beginning, and I think that's going to lead to a lot more investment and buy-in. And when those requests come in to consult, you know, I personally, the responses that I go to are the folks that I have that relationship with, you know, the people that I know well, as opposed to this person or this organization that's just coming in that I have not had the time to build relationships.
All right, great. Thank you for that, Chas. So you somewhat, both of you somewhat already touched on a question out of Androscoggin SWCD, which I looked up, and that's in Maine. And so the question was, how can state or local organizations be better support or resource to tribes? And so you did mention, both of you really emphasized that need for relationships and building those in anticipation of projects. But I'm curious if you have any other comments in response to that question.
My recommendation is just start small, you know, reach out, have a joint project, maybe less than $10,000, and start to build upon that, and you know, build the trust, the communication. You know, little by little, you'll find out, you know, who's involved and who's the movers and shakers of the tribe, and build upon that. You know, there are people that are you know, that are really oriented toward conservation and agriculture. You know, it's just a matter of knocking on the right doors. So I think if you start small with small projects, joint projects, and start to build on that, I think that, you know, that's, at least it's a start. And then the other question was, you know, degraded lands. We're at the point now with some of our tribal nations is, you know, if we're going to live on this federal trust land indefinitely, we don't have a choice anymore. You know, we have to start now. It might take 20 years for it to bounce back, but you know, if we keep kicking the can further down the road, it's not solving it for anybody. And, you know, we don't live in a bubble. You know, whatever we do also affects our neighbors, which also affects, you know, the states. And so, you know, some of these overgrazed issues, that we're trying to address, that goes into erosion issues and water quality issues further down the rivers. So yeah, it's even if it is too late, we got to at least make an effort, But I think things can still turn around. It's just going to take time and going to take it's going to take money, and it's also going to take a commitment, a strong commitment. And so where we leave off in the future is where these youth corps are going to hopefully pick up. So thank you.
And on that note, Delane, that's not exclusive to tribal lands either. We can't kick the can down the road regardless of where we're looking. So thank you for that point. Chas?
Yeah, these two questions are intertwined. I talked about Western science and traditional knowledge, and Western science, I think in many ways is catching up with knowledge that has been passed down to us for generations. And in one way that this is being shown is that indigenous managed lands have a higher rate of biodiversity and are a lot healthier. The ecosystems are healthier. And so I think something that states and local agencies can do is invest money, give money to the tribes to utilize how they recognize that funding needs to be used to work on projects that they've identified that need to be worked on, as opposed to the other agencies dictating what the projects look like. Here in New Mexico, there are some great examples of state agencies prioritizing funding projects created by tribes. The Outdoor Recreation Division has a number of grants that are out right now that really focuses on wanting to fund tribes, land grant communities, et cetera. And so recognizing that, for many years, the funding has not come directly to tribes themselves to be able to utilize, or they've not had that autonomy to be able to create the programs. The priorities and the projects have been handed down, or those directives have been given to the tribes. So I think, allowing the tribes to create those projects and identify, the priorities is a critical step. And then, yeah, absolutely, I believe that that those degraded lands, there is hope for those to be restored, to be rejuvenated. And I think it does, though, really rely on looking at the tribes. The Western practices of restoration, I don't think have been inclusive of indigenous philosophies, indigenous voices. And so I think really looking to those practitioners, those knowledge keepers who have been in place for generations, right? Not coming in within a couple of generations or a few decades and saying this is what we need to restore it to, but it's that long view of this place and this space, and those ideas that come from having been in a place for so long that need to be lifted up and prioritized. But I do have hope. We have to keep hope that we can do that good work.
One thing that we haven't really mentioned is a lot of politics play a huge role in what we do on tribal nations, and especially in New Mexico, a lot of leadership gets changed yearly. And so that adds to the difficulty of working with tribes. Some of the other tribal nations, it's on a 4-year rotation, and some of them, they voted to change, leaders a little bit longer because they know that, it takes more than a year to get some of these projects off the ground. But to add to that, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they're the fiduciary managers of our federal trust land. And so, when they turned over some of the responsibilities to the tribal nations through the 638 program, they literally handed over the checkbook to some of the tribes to run their own programs. And at that time, some of the tribes didn't have the capacity to do that. And some of them still don't have the capacity to do that. And that's where some of our organizations kind of fit in that little niche right now. And so that's how we're starting to, find progress in places where we can aid the tribes out. But that's something to keep in mind. And then also, from my experience in agriculture and conservation, we're kind of falling short on the federal agency side. And, we do a lot of work for them through our organization just to do a lot of outreach work, but still it don't seem like we're getting projects done, not at the capacity that it's happening on the outside off reservation. And so, and our tribes, they don't see they're focused on emergency management. They're focused on hospitals, elderly programs. They don't always, focus on conservation and agriculture, even though that's our biggest asset. So I think in the future, there is going to be room for investors, off reservation investors to invest on their tribal lands, because that's the missing link. I always get, I address different organizations, and, some of them, they don't understand that we don't own the federal lands, and what that means is we can't participate in, commercial bank programs. And we have a deed to put up for a $100,000 tractor to make our fields more productive, or buy a no-till machinery or whatever. So we're going to have to get more creative on how we address these issues, because the federal agencies, it's just an ongoing barrier that we can't crack that egg. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Delane. And as a member of NACD's Tribal Outreach and Partnerships, RPG, as well, our resource policy group, which is essentially meant to provide some of that advocacy, that's one avenue that of course we try to help, but NAC, of course, is always open to other suggestions of how we can especially reach out to those federal agencies on behalf of tribal organizations to make sure that the voice is well heard, and especially with regard to some of those farm bill programs and things like that. So I do want to check in, actually, because we do have the vice chair of the Tribal Outreach and Partnerships Subcommittee. I hope she's listening in. Sadie, I want to see if you're available maybe to say hello and offer a few words on behalf of the Tribal RPG. All right. I did tell her I was going to put her on the spot. So, but with that said, we are approaching the hour. So I just want to give everyone one last, second to put any questions in. We did receive a recommendation from one of our participants here about an opportunity for grant opportunities through Tribal Tree City USA. So if any of you are interested in that, please look into that. So on that note as well, Delane and Chas, I'd like to give you a couple minutes just to kind of wrap up and any last minute comments or suggestions for the group as well.
Ultimately, this is all of this is reinforcing our tribal sovereignty. The more we can focus on our food sovereignty and invest in our youth, that's gonna prolong our tribal nations and our sovereignty. So bigger picture, further down the road, this is awesome, and it's good to meet this other organization doing great things too. So thank you for the invite, and thank you for your support, NACD, for what you do for us too. Thank you.
Yeah, just reiterating the comments that Delane made and points that he made, and just really appreciate the time, the opportunity to connect with you all. Really enjoy hearing about the work that you all are doing, Delane, and look forward to connecting with you. And then to reiterate, conservation districts play a critical role in all of this work. And so looking forward to seeing how we can collaborate and partner to support, the tribal sovereignty, the investment in our Indigenous young people, the next generation of conservationists, of land and water protectors, of professionals in these realms, and to reinforce the tribal sovereignty and the health and well-being of our communities. And we talk about communities as being not just the towns and places that we live, but the broader communities of the natural world as well. So yeah, thank you all. Thank you for the time.
Real quick, one thing that got brought up here lately is the opportunity to possibly for the tribes to put massacre sites, spiritual sites in a conservation easement. So indefinitely protect those sites. So that's an opportunity for conservation. And then, you know, just to let everybody know, you know, conservation districts, although it's not new to the states, it's somewhat of a new intimidating concept for our tribal nations because it's asking for grassroots level leadership. And usually that's turned over to the tribe or the BIA to make those decisions. So it's going to take a little while to get these off the ground to what their full capability can be in the future. So it's exciting. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Delane. And thank you, Chas. And I want to say as well, thank you for this great conversation. I really enjoyed today's webinar because I do feel as though it was just an opportunity to connect and learn from each other and start the dialogue. So I encourage both of you to continue to reach out to myself and others within NACD staff to continue to share information, opportunities, challenges, successes. We'd be happy to share that with our organization and our members. And with that, we are going to end today's webinar. But before I do that, tengo que decir gracias a todos porque estoy aquí in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So I just said, of course, thank you to everyone for your participation as I am here in San Juan, Puerto Rico, but had to do it in Spanish to respect our partners here. So thank you on that note, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the future at the next webinar. Take care.